What is up, YouTube? Welcome to Dre's Thoughts. This is where we discuss 3 topics per day, 3 news articles, give our thoughts and opinions on them, and see what implications they may have. If this sounds like your cup of tea, feel free to drop a sub and a like on the video, or wait to make your decision at the very end. Let's get into it. So the way this controversy began is the U.S. actually put some measures in to prevent Iran itself from using the Strait of Hormuz for their own interests. So it is an international oil trade route. However, Iran would be prevented from using it due to the U.S. waivers. Now, Iran is obviously not liking that, and it's threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz altogether. Of course, the U.S. doesn't like that, and it's sticking to its guns. But as we see, Iran has a lot of things to say about that. So, Iran warns false flag accident could lure Trump into war. Now, as we know, the tensions between Iran and the U.S. have been pretty high as of late. And as it says, following U.S. declarations that the Washington and its allies intend to take Iranian crude exports down to zero by canceling waivers previously granted to 8 nations, tensions are now soaring over the Strait of Hormuz, with Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards attempting to lay down the law amid fears of the U.S. Navy could move to block Iran's access. So, well, we know the tensions have been high for quite a while. Iran and the U.S. have not been getting along. Trump's been very straightforward with them. He's been very, he has not been holding back, not being very politically correct, as some may say. So this leads to statements like this. I don't think he wants more, Zarif said in an interview at the Iranian mission to the UN in New York, according to Reuters. But that doesn't exclude him from being basically lured into one. Now, the idea... what does luring mean in this scenario? Like, what do they mean by being lured into a war? Are they saying there can be a scenario where Trump has no choice but to pretty much respond with action, some military action, some economic sanctions, something serious that may push this even further? Because the idea of being lured into war is under the concept that you're not you're unaware of the greater picture, but you're being motivated to follow a certain line of thinking. That is what luring implies. Those who have designed the policies that are being pursued do not simply want a negotiated solution, but let me make it clear that Iran is not seeking confrontation but will not escape defending itself. Again, very broad statements, so then it's coming down to buying oil. We believe that Iran will continue to sell its oil, we will continue to find buyers for our oil, and we will continue to use the Strait of Hormuz as a safe transit passage for the sale of our oil, Zarif said. If the United States takes the crazy measure of trying to prevent us from doing that, then it should be prepared for the consequences, the foreign ministry warned further. So, it seems that, I don't know where the luring into war takes place in this equation, but it seems that the consequences for this scenario is being lured into war. That is what is implied by the consequences. These are very serious words that are using, and they're definitely already escalated tensions that were already pretty high to begin with. So the U.S. has a decision, diplomatic decisions here upon how to approach the situation. Exactly how much, how much should they interfere with Iran's actually ability to sell oil? At this stage, it seems like it's a gamble, because going back is kind of letting your power go a little bit. But at the same time, how much power should the U.S. have in the first place? And should they even be interfering to this extent with Iran's interests? Because the consequences could be pretty serious. It could be pretty serious at the end of the day. Moving on to the next story of the day. Millennials are less healthy and more depressed than Gen X, report finds. This is to be expected in a day of social media and the economic instability that many millennials face due to the ridiculous Western housing markets, the insecurity of jobs, the stagnated wages in many Western parts of the world. Now, the article says that more than 8 in 10 millennials said they considered themselves to be good in or excellent health, but the prevalence of the top 10 health conditions affecting their generation increased from 2014 to 2017, a report released Wednesday by the Blue Cross Shield Association. The report analyzed 55 million commercially insured millennials, defined as those ages 21 to 36 in 2017, and identified the top 10 conditions affecting their health. Among the conditions, major depression increased by 31%, disorders tied to hyperactivity by 29%, and type 2 diabetes by 22%. So, what can we conclude? This article is focusing the gap between 2014 to 2017. Now, what has increased in that time? For sure, the rise of Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. All those are exponentially growing throughout those years, by the way. Those social media platforms skyrocketed. But there's not much else to go from this because technology has always existed the last decade to a very big form. Of course, Netflix and things like that made people lazier to an extent, but those were there in 2012 and 2011 online. So, maybe the growing popularity of those things, of those platforms, has elevated these. From what we see here, major depression, type 2 diabetes, and hyperactivity, I feel like those all relate to a certain amount of internet usage and lifestyle habits that are motivated by certain. The more food is motivated to be mass produced, the more likely it is to have certain shortcuts in its production that are not necessarily good for our health, and more times than not, they aren't good for our health. So that could be an increase, especially with the new developments they have in terms of the food industry, the MSG, the GMO. It's definitely impacting the way people eat, and I think it's going to be growing more and more. Hyperactivity. Now, hyperactivity will be tied to social media use, gaming, internet browsing, especially where things are coming at you very quickly. So I feel like the internet and technology are probably the main criteria for satisfying this growth in these disorders and mental issues that people may be having. And I think that this trend is not likely to stop in the future, to be honest, because we're only going further into the technology route. Our food is being mass produced, and companies are trying to figure out how to make it taste better, prioritizing obviously income and capitalism over anything else. So I don't see this trend going away anytime soon, to be honest. Dr. William B. Leisure, a psychiatrist at Mayo Clinic and chair of its Integrated Behavioral Health Department, said affordable access to mental health treatment beyond traditional face-to-face appointments is needed too. So the problem here is that we already know that there's a huge problem in terms of let's get that out of the screen. There's a huge problem when it comes to military and getting mental health treatment because clinics and the professionals are overloaded with clients. And this trend for just the regular citizen, it's a lengthy process just to see someone nowadays. Yes, it could be easier to find more people to talk to others, to talk to those that need the help. But the core of the problem is the habits these people are participating in, and the motivation to participate in those habits they're the core of our society at the moment. And young people, and millennials, of course, and the future generation, I'm sure the study is going to be persistent among those, are basically at a stage where even if they go see someone, is that really going to help them? Is that really going to help them? Because they can spend an hour or two there, but then the majority of their life is spent with seeing the media, talking to people that think in the same way they do, their social groups, their surroundings, spending time on the internet, especially with the lonely rates, which are another discussion in itself. But people who are lonely tend to obviously spend more time on the internet and among technology. So things like that are all contributing factors that are at the core, the foundation of the problem. And finding other people to talk to, I don't think is necessarily going to it's going to put a band-aid on the issue, but it's not going to solve the issue. So that is my thoughts on that. Moving on to the next story of the day. And the final story. China to build a moon base near lunar South Pole. China plans to build a scientific research station on the moon in about 10 years. The China National Space Administration intends to build the research station in the region of the moon's South Pole. Zhang Keizhan, I hope I pronounced that right, head of the CSNA, said in a public statement. Details of China's long-term lunar plans are still sketchy, but has made significant steps toward lunar exploration. Earlier this year, the Chinese successfully landed uncrewed Chang'e 4 on the far side of the moon. We all know China's space exploration is nice. They're a very industrial nation. However, their technology is progressing at a very rapid rate. Their economy is booming. They have everyone dependent on them. The majority of the world imports are dependent on China. Everything is made there. Companies, corporations, even big one, the biggest ones like Apple are dependent on China. China were to cease to exist, their products would skyrocket the price of them, or they would cease to exist because investors would not be able to afford because people would not be able to afford those products, and investors would not make money in return. So the company would shut down altogether. It relies on that price point that it currently has. Now, the implication to build a moon base, of course, it's interesting to entertain the thought. The outcomes of it are still to be seen because for what purpose having a moon base? What benefits can it provide to the country? The occupation of it? Because let's go to the military aspect of having weapons in space, satellites. We already have satellites in space. Countries all over the world have satellites disposed in space, and they are able to scan, provide intel. Very important in terms of national security and just it's the standard for being a nation nowadays for many. Now, in terms of a moon base, the implications of that are interesting because unless you're able to develop something on the moon that's that's exclusive to having a location on the moon, then I feel like maybe it could hold that, but nothing really comes to mind for me. But for a moon base, I think it could be more of a proxy point for resources, for just quick organization. I'm not sure exactly what their motivation is, but I definitely found this interesting to say the least. In terms of how America will respond to this, that's also to be seen. Alright everyone, thank you for watching the video. I appreciate it. If you have your own comments on these, feel free to post them below. I'm always interested to hear your comments, to read them. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.